on the 2023 song First Person Shooter, which, for reasons other than the song, has aged like milk. J. Cole said that he and Drake were like the Spider-Man meme pointing at each other. It was a cheeky way for the two of them to say that they were on top of the game together, in a video that saw them replicating an infamous photo shoot that starred who they would consider to be their soccer equivalents, Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. There was somebody that they forgot to ask about the whole thing, but that's besides the point. Either way, Cole and Drake have been grouped together since basically the beginning of their careers. They've collaborated on 4 songs over the years, going all the way back to 2010's In the Morning. They went on tour together last year into 2024, although this year probably didn't go how either of them really planned. Drake ran hot into a rap beef that did not go the way that he expected, while Cole dipped his toe into that beef, changed his mind and jumped out when he realized it was about more than just music, and then went back to business as usual. But they both did something very similar in 2024, and that's empty the vault. J. Cole walked us through his career with Inevitable, his 2024 audio series, where he sat down with his longtime manager Ibrahim Hamad and video director Scott Laser to reminisce and recap on his career. Along the way, he re-released his old mixtapes onto DSPs and announced a 10-year anniversary show for his album 2014 Forest Hills Drive in New York City that sold out within seconds. Drake, on the other hand, released a massive data dump onto a website called 100 Gigs, containing, among other things, almost 18 hours of never-before-seen footage from his career, along with 5 new songs featuring artists like Lotto, 21 Savage, Young Thug, and kind of Playboi Carti. It's not really clear what happened there. Both artists had a similar goal in pulling back the curtain. It's fan service for the people who have stuck with them through their decades-long journeys in the rap game. But the ways in which they did it are strikingly different, and to me, it's deeper than that. Inevitable and 100 Gigs are excellent ways to understand the difference between J. Cole and Drake. In the way that they serve their fan bases, we can see why the fans are drawn to them in the first place. We can understand how they want to be remembered, how they want to be received, and how they want their place in the game to be considered. At the root of these two artists who share, beyond what seems to be a genuine friendship, but a huge portion of their fan bases with each other, there still seems to be a deep ideological divide between the relatable and the aspirational, and that divide defines why we as fans enjoy the things that we do. So let's get into all that. But before we do that, if you like videos on music like this one, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. I post a video every week. If you want to see them early, go to my Instagram, HADJI Gaviota, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post the links to all my videos in the broadcast channel one day early for free. Also, I just dropped an album called Gut Punch. I really appreciate all the comments, people coming over saying that they liked it, checking it out. I'll put the link to stream it in the description. And I just dropped some merch. I got these black hoodies with puff print logos on them, and then these white tees with this really sick illustration from my Showtime music video. It's all high quality stuff. The tees are comfort colors, so it's like they're gonna last. Like, you don't have to worry about throwing out after one wear. Like, I make good stuff over here. So I'm putting my store in the description as well. Some sizes are really limited or already gone because of the show I had last week, but still plenty left up there if you want to try to grab it. All right, let's get back to the video. J. Cole's Inevitable, which he branded as a limited audio series, but to you and I, we can probably call it a podcast, was officially announced on November 17th. But the truth is, he hinted at it a few months ago at the Dreamville Fest, where he sold merch that said the fall off is inevitable on it. The podcast is simple. It's Cole, his manager Ebe, sitting together as Cole and Ebe recount the journey over the past few years. It starts with Cole deciding that he wants to go to college in New York so that he can pursue his rap career. That brings him to St. John's University in Queens. Queens get the money, how we doing? Where he formed a basketball rivalry with Ebe that eventually turned into a friendship as they bonded over partying and rap music. That led to a grind and some years of working these like menial newspaper advertisement jobs, standing outside of Jay-Z's studio trying to give him beats only to get rejected, and grinding on the music until it got to the point where Jay was reintroduced to him and decided to sign him. I'm skipping a lot, but I don't just want this to be a recap. I highly recommend just paying the $10 if you're a fan of J. Cole at all, or if you just are an artist and you want to like understand the artist's journey. I think it's really valuable that way as well. And if you don't have the $10, there's a lot of people on Twitter who are just like recapping it in these long blurbs, so you can check it out that way too. Probably the coolest thing about Inevitable is the way that J. Cole integrated it with him re-releasing his old mixtapes onto streaming services. Spotify and other streaming services have become the dominant way to consume music since like the early to mid 2010s. But in the period right before then, the free mixtape was especially popular in hip hop. Back then, there were 2 classes of releases: the official album, which usually artists would reserve for when they signed to their major label, and that would go on iTunes to be sold for money, and then you'd make CDs, and those would be in Best Buy or Target or wherever you would buy them. And the mixtape, which is something that they would release for free so that people could just download it and put it on their iPods or their phones. As music streaming became the wave, Some of these projects were lost in the dust for a while. Bigger mainstream artists have made it a point to re-release their old mixtapes onto DSPs, so that old fans can keep it all on the same app, and new fans can discover why the old fans fell in love with them in the first place. Drake himself re-released his classic mixtape So Far Gone onto streaming services in 2019 for the 10-year anniversary of the project. Travis Scott did the same thing for the 10-year anniversary of his mixtape Days Before Rodeo, and even added some bonus tracks, and it came out this past July, and it did 361,000 units in its first week, and it was 600 copies short of going #1 overall, and it fell a little bit short to Sabrina Carpenter. Pretty crazy numbers for a 10-year-old project. Nicki Minaj has done it as well. Even less A-list blog era artists like the Flatbush Zombies or XV have also re-released their mixtapes onto streaming services and tried to make it a thing. It seems like a no-brainer to re-release these projects onto a platform that the majority of listeners now use, and also will make you money per stream even if it's super minuscule. However, it's the second half of that statement that makes things a lot more complicated. Because the projects make money, that means you have to tie up all the loose ends about who owns what. When you were releasing it for free, it wasn't a big deal. And when you release an album through a label, the label makes you take care of all this stuff before you drop it. In the mixtape era, people would sample whatever, rap over whoever's beats, and just drop it because they weren't putting it up for sale. There was a distinction between music that would just float around on the internet and music that was officially released. So to re-release these mixtapes, you have to go back and clear all of those samples, pay all of those producers, cross all the T's and dot all the I's that you never did in 2010. And J. Cole has publicly acknowledged the difficulty of that. At his 2023 Dreamville Festival performance, he went on stage and begged Kanye West to clear his song Villmatic from his mixtape Friday Night Lights, because he raps over the beat from Kanye's song Devil in a New Dress. Now, even getting Kanye's permission might have been an issue for Cole because the two of them have had some issues in the past. It's actually something that Cole talks about in the audio series as well. But just to use Devil in a New Dress as an example, Kanye is just the tip of the iceberg. He didn't produce that beat, so you have to clear it with whoever produced it. And then whoever he sampled in the beat, you gotta clear it with them too. Kanye is infamous for being very liberal. Let me finish that sentence. About the credits that he puts on the songs that he puts out. If you're in the room, there's a pretty good chance he's gonna list you as a writer. One of my favorite Kanye song credits to look at is All Day, which apparently was written by 20 people, including Diddy, Paul McCartney, Kendrick Lamar, and French Montana, who has a producer credit on it. Imagine sampling that song and trying to clear it. Somehow, against all odds, J. Cole was able to clear the entirety of his 3 mixtapes, the Come Up, the Warm Up, and Friday Night Lights. But rather than just dump them all onto the platforms and post about it once and move on, Cole made it an experience by re-releasing them along with the inevitable podcast series. As he goes chronologically through his career, when he gets to the point where he talks about making that tape, he re-releases it. So if you're a fan who was following along the whole time like I was, you actually were brought back to the Warm Up and the Friday Night Lights days. You felt like you were there for a little second before you jumped in and re-listened, which for me at least, it had been a long time since I listened to Friday Night Lights especially. It's clear that Cole considered the fan experience very heavily when he did this. And now for the actual content of the audio series, Cole is not playing it safe. He's on here talking about delicate relationships with huge artists, including Drake, including Kendrick, including his boss Jay-Z, including Kanye, knowing that it'll make headlines, even if it's behind a $10 paywall. Without spoiling too much of the experience, here are some of the things he talked about. Aggressively approaching Jay-Z in the club to tell him to get off his back about making him a single, feeling insecure about his place in rap after hearing Drake's So Far Gone and Kendrick's Good Kid Mad City, feeling like Kanye gave him a pity feature on the song Looking for Trouble and maybe even messed with his vocals a little bit. He played snippets of 4 unreleased songs with Kendrick that have never seen the light of day and will probably never get released outside of that podcast. And the Forest Hills Drive episodes are still not out, so who knows what's going to be on there. And beyond those big names, Cole was just generally very open and honest. It's pretty rare to hear that from someone who is as successful as he is, and also normally very private. He went in depth on the struggles of trying to please a label, and the euphoric flow state of creating some of his most popular songs. He broke down the lyrical content of some of his heavier songs like Runaway and Can I Holla At Ya? And when he heard the second verse of the latter, he even broke down in tears. Compare this approach to that of a peer like Kendrick Lamar, who despite sharing a giant overlap in audience, often moves in a way that is designed to preserve his mystique. And we'll compare this all to Drake a little bit later in the video. J. Cole is honest and he'll bear it all. And to his fans, that's the appeal. And to his detractors, it's a point against him. On a podcast like this, where the $10 barrier is likely keeping most of his haters outside of the club, these things will be almost universally praised. Go in the recent comments for that song Can I Holla At Ya, which is a Lucy that, only probably bigger Cole fans know about. And you'll see fans relating to the story and praising him for being vulnerable when he talked about it. And it's not too hard to imagine some of his social media haters making fun of him if that had happened on The Breakfast Club or on a Kai Cenat stream or just somewhere more public where they could see a video of him crying or hear the audio. And think about some of Cole's most ridiculed moments in pop culture. The obvious example from this year is him stepping out of the Drake and Kendrick beef very publicly, after entering it rather playfully with the song 7 Minute Drill, where he kept it to music, and then he took it down and apologized for it. His reasoning was that he couldn't stand on it. But the undertones of it, and with hindsight, you could see that he likely knew or heard that this beef was going to exit the sphere of just music and get really nasty and personal between two artists that he probably considers to be friends. His diss was all rap related. It was like, oh, Kendrick, your album's boring. Which, like, I mean, did he really think that? I'm not sure he ever really thought that. But Kendrick and Drake both took it to places that were far beyond that. So in my opinion, I mean, he was probably right to step down, even if the way that he did it got him a lot of flack. But to rap purists, apologizing for a beef is something that will be a permanent stain on your record. To them, it's something that makes you look weak. How can you call yourself the best rapper on earth, which he regularly does on his songs, especially more recently, and then apologize for getting into a rather harmless rap beef at the time? Even to people who aren't strict arbiters of what's cool and what's not in the culture, they might see a move like that as kinda corny. To some people, it's too honest, it's too soft. It was admitting something that never had to be admitted. It's like something that the kid who raises his hand and tells the teacher that we had homework last night would do. His back and forth with popular underground rapper No Name is another example of where a moment of honesty might have actually hurt Cole's reputation in the public eye. On May 29th, 2020, as civil unrest around the murder of George Floyd was rising in America, No Name tweeted, "Poor black folks all over the country are putting their bodies on the line in protest for our collective safety, and y'all favorite top-selling rappers not even willing to put a tweet up." And continued to say that whole discographies be about black plight and they nowhere to be found. While she did not name any names, many took this to be about Kendrick or J. Cole, or probably a couple other artists. J. Cole also took it to be about J. Cole, and a few weeks later he responded with the song Snow on the Bluff, where he said, "My IQ is average, there's a young lady out there, she way smarter than me, but it's something about the queen tone that's bothering me." Before he went on to explain that he felt like her environment contributed to her having this conscious view and he thinks that's great, but he wants to speak to the people and reach the people who didn't have that. And in his view, he said that it's more effective to treat people like children, understanding the time and love and patience that's needed to grow. No Name then responded with song 33, as many people latched on to what they called the tone policing in Cole's response, especially the phrase queen tone. She also questioned, "He really about to write about me when the world is in smokes?" Cole actually retweeted the song and said, "I haven't done a lot of reading and I don't feel well equipped as a leader in these times, but I do a lot of thinking. And I appreciate her and others like her because they challenge my beliefs, and I feel that in these times that's important." In the end, last year it was reported that this was all totally pieced up, and Cole actually donated to one of No Name's causes, which is really cool to see. There were a lot of heavier and more nuanced topics in this exchange. What's the best way to educate people about what's going on, about the injustice in our society? What are the most effective ways as an artist with a platform that's gigantic and probably millions and millions of dollars to use your voice and your resources for the greater good? But a good chunk of the discussion on this ended up being about Cole saying his IQ was average or the tone policing, the latter of which I think was pretty valid. That line did not read well, did not sound well, even the second it came out. But there was so much talk about the IQ stuff, and to a lot of people it's kind of this like pointless and silly deflection. It's exactly the kind of thing that someone who's not into J. Cole's whole like personable, down-to-earth thing would latch onto and be like, man, this is stupid. Even as I was working on this video, I came across another thing that just perfectly encapsulates the J. Cole experience. On his 2011 song Rise and Shine, he says, "Brother, you lame, you Shane Battier," in reference to Shane Battier, who's an NBA player who also played at Duke, which is the rival college of North Carolina that Cole's a big fan of. It was a pretty harmless shot, and like on the scale of like NBA players, like Shane Battier is definitely more swagless than others. But Shane actually said in an interview that while he was out to eat sometime last year, J. Cole was also at the same restaurant, and he came up to him at dinner and apologized for the line. You can see Cole as this like principled stand-up guy, or you can see it as like, here goes more of this humble shit. Man, you're a superstar, man, you're unfathomably rich. I don't want to see you pretending to be this regular guy. I don't want to eat the J. Cole meal. Because you see, to succeed, artists need to find the right balance of relatable and aspirational that works for them. You want to connect with your fans, but you also want to inspire them and push them to go harder. A lot of Cole's music is motivational, but he definitely tips much further on the scale of relatable. As he talks about in Inevitable, earlier in his career, he tried to be more of that aspirational rapper guy, but it didn't make him feel right. Drake, on the other hand, did the opposite. He began his career as more relatable, as a young kid trying to make it in the industry. That aspect of his personality was still plainly visible for a pretty long time, even as he started to get more and more successful. Look at a song like Look What You've Done on his second album, Take Care. He had already done huge numbers with his debut, had big hits, but he was still talking like a regular guy. Talking about seeing painkillers on his mom's kitchen counter, or having a fraught and kind of distant relationship with his dad and having to seek life advice from another family member. Like, that's the kind of stuff that people really relate to. As Alphonse Pierre said about Drake for Pitchfork this year, Drake became a star because of his vulnerability and goofiness. It felt like you knew him even if you actually didn't. Coming off as vulnerable and relatable in hip-hop, especially in the late 2000s and the early 2010s when Drake and Cole were both kind of rising, meant that a lot of people would call you soft. Add this to the fact that he intertwined R&B into his sound in a way that a lot of mainstream rappers didn't really do before him, besides Kanye. And you've got the recipe for all those crying Drake memes that we used to see on the internet. And so rather than try to remain relatable forever, I think Drake saw a ceiling in being that relatable soft guy. So he shifted towards a more aspirational approach with his image and his music. He was always a hitmaker, but he added an edge to it, aligning himself with artists like Future and Young Thug to expand his audience. And if that really was the goal, I mean, it absolutely worked. You'd be hard-pressed to find an artist more commercially successful than Drake. You can count those guys on one, maybe two hands at most. And I'm not talking about rappers, I'm talking about artists, like just artists. And I really don't feel like that's an exaggeration. So when someone with that kind of star power opens the vault, it's probably not going to be done in the tell-all format like how Cole did it. And sure enough, 100 Gigs is something totally different. It's presented as this free-to-access website, with folders filtering by era and style of content. We do hear Drake talk here or there, but mostly we see Drake. And that's the first big difference. Cole created an audio series with no video, at a time when clips and short-form video content are really the most popular thing that you can do. I just watched a clip on Twitter of a guy who was streaming in his car and he got rear-ended, and the first thing he said was,
"Wow, that's a clip."
100 Gigs, on the other hand, feels like it's encouraging you to download it and then share it. Compared to Cole's paywalled audio experience where you can't even record it, on 100 Gigs, there are big buttons that say download next to every file. A big part of this was the timing of the release. 100 Gigs was posted a couple months after the biggest song of the year, Not Like Us, derailed Drake's career and damaged his integrity in a way that he's never seen during his decade-plus long run. The shareability feels like an attempt to get everyone to reminisce on the simpler times, and actively share it on social media so that it can swim upstream against the current of memes that were making Drake the butt of the joke. But don't let that make you think that 100 Gigs is some cynical thing and that the content is not cool or valuable to a Drake fan. I personally found it so sick to watch Drake like get in the studio and find his flow for a song like Furthest Thing, which is one of my favorite Drake songs. And you could like see everybody in the studio nodding along too. Like, that's a real moment that happens as an artist in the studio, and sometimes it's hard to explain to people who haven't done it what it's like. Cole spent a lot of time talking about it on the podcast, which is really cool, especially when it comes to songs like Power Trip, where he's like, I get in this flow state, right? But to hear about the flow state versus seeing the flow state, it's like two totally different things. And so I think Drake did a really good job of representing that. 100 Gigs is curated by a superstar, maintaining an aspirational image. It's done by someone too cool to tell you exactly what it's like, to explicitly lay out the trials and the tribulations and the insecurities that come along with trying to become the biggest artist on the face of the earth. It's all in there, but you have to click around to find it. Because if you want to be more aspirational than relatable, you're here to wow, you're not here to yap. In Alphonse's critique, he said, "These are the exact sort of clips a politician might leak of themselves after they were caught muttering a racist remark or banging their assistant, to highlight how curated it all feels." And even if that's true, you could argue that it's the necessary byproduct of maintaining that aspirational image. Also fair to say to Drake that he already shot the bullets of re-releasing all his music. Like, as a Drake fan, I can't think of that many Drake songs that aren't on streaming services that he could just pump out. Like, So Far Gone's already up there, he did the Care Package. Not that much left. If you sit down and you think about your favorite artists, the ones you care about more than just like, oh, I put them on in the background, I save their songs on Spotify sometimes, they're a vibe while I'm driving, I listen to them in the gym to get pumped up, like artists that you really care about, chances are your attachment to them is either through relatability or aspiration. Like, damn, they're going through exactly what I went through. Or damn, let me go harder so I could be like them. The best artists know how to use the strengths of both to keep you fully engaged. Cole knows his bag is in the relatability world, so even as he's an aspirational guy, even as he drops these songs like, I'm the greatest rapper ever, he knows what his fans want. And that's that hunger, that dollar in the dream stuff. And so he goes back to that whenever he can because he knows that's how he solidifies his fan base. Drake, on the other hand, made a deliberate choice to move away from being that guy that a lot of people related to to being like, I am the biggest artist in the world. And so to do that and to maintain that, you have to constantly do these things that keep you as an aspirational figure. So Cole relies on the relatability and the allegory of his story in the music industry to pull out all those nostalgic feelings. And then Drake shows you videos of him riding on an ATV to be like, this is what your life could be like. You could be in Turks if you go as hard as I do. These approaches to building and engaging with your fan base as an artist also affect the type of relationship that you have with your fans. Cole may have less listeners than Drake, and you'd be hard pressed to find a metric that says otherwise, but I don't think it's a huge leap to say that the percentage of those listeners that are like deep fans of Cole is probably higher than that of those of Drake. I think I personally identify as a bigger Cole fan. He was kind of my first favorite out of the two of them. When the warm-up came out when I was in high school, I know I'm old. I've been to more Cole shows, I've bought more Cole merch, I listened to his entire audio series. But if we go by the numbers, I'm pretty sure I've listened to more Drake in my life than Cole. Look at who keeps popping up in my Spotify Wrapped every year. It's an interesting phenomenon to unpack, right? Like I feel like I relate to one of these guys way more, yet who do I listen to more? The one who is pushed to be the big star, right? It really makes you think. So you should think about your relationship with your favorite artist and what that's like. If you're a fan of both or either, I hope that this was enlightening. If you hate both of them, I hope you have a better understanding of why some people do like them. If you're an artist yourself, or you do another similar analogous field where you have to think about how you want to present yourself, I also hope that this was helpful. Let me know what you want me to cover next. Peace.